Hey everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it's time for another episode of the Halloween 15 for 2021. This time out, it's episode 11, and I wanted to take a look at Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark from 2019. And when I first heard of this movie, I thought it was a straight up anthology story or an anthology movie, but it really isn't. It's less like something like Trilogy of Terror or Tales from the Dark Side or Creepshow. Than it is sort of this collection of stories that are told within a story. And I know that sounds like an analogy, but it really isn't. The stories are actually woven into the overarching, bookend of the story. So it's a little more than just somebody telling stories and you see them in vignettes and that's it. They're all interwoven, and all of these stories and elements of these stories concern a small town in Pennsylvania called Mill Valley that has sort of this dark past. At the beginning of the film, we're quickly introduced to a trio of friends. There's Stella, who's played by Zoe Margaret Coletti, Augie, who's played by Gabriel Rush, and Chuck, who's played by Austin Zajur. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correct. They're all preparing for Halloween night. This takes place in 1968, and they have a run-in with the local bully. His name is Tommy, played by Austin Abrams. And afterwards, they take off and run away from him, and they hide in the local drive-in. And they actually end up getting into a car that's owned by Ramon, who's played by Michael Garza. And Ramon and Stella kind of hit it off right away because they have a mutual love of horror movies. And when Stella suggests that the group go to visit a haunted house, Ramon's all in and takes them there immediately in his car. So while they're at the house, the three friends fill Ramon in on the backstory of this big mansion that's considered a haunted house. It was owned by a family called the Bellows, and they had a daughter named Sarah who was kept locked in the basement because she's different. Of course, that usually is a euphemism for being reviled by the community or something evil happened. I'll leave it up to you to discover in the movie what she did or didn't do. But as the group explores this decrepit mansion, Stella finds a storybook that was supposed to be written by Sarah, and unbeknownst to her, the book possesses a strange power over the real world that is unleashed when it leaves the house. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark takes its time to get rolling, but once it does, it's really kind of a thrill ride of spook house scares. There's a lot of jump scares, but there's a lot of really creepy moments, and I had an excellent time watching this. Each of the stories in Sarah's book are taken from those that are included in a series of books by Alvin Schwartz. And I've never read those books. I don't know anything about them, so I can't tell you how faithful the movie is to those original stories. But as they're presented here, they all sort of have this urban legend quality to them that makes them feel sort of strangely familiar. But thankfully, the stories and the writing is creative enough to keep you on the edge of your seat because you really don't know what's coming next or who is going to be involved in the next story. And it might sort of sound like a Stranger Things ripoff because it's this group of friends trying to solve a mystery in a small town in the past, this being the 60s instead of the 80s like Stranger Things. But it's definitely not. It has a completely different feel. This has sort of more of a melancholy feel because it takes place during 1968, during the Vietnam War. It's during the election of President Nixon. And there's some, racial, I wouldn't want to say racism undertones because it bubbles up to more than that because the whole town is giving Ramon a side eye because he's not a white guy. Director Andre Overdahl, I am hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly because I don't think I've ever said his name out loud, but I'm very familiar with some of his past work, including Troll Hunter and The Autopsy of Jane Doe, both of which are fantastic movies. I think he's created another winner here. Even though this one's aimed at sort of a younger audience, I think that Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is one of those movies that would be really fun to watch with the whole family, as long as they're not too young. It's a PG-13 film, and I think that's an appropriate rating for it. But I think this is a genuinely scary good time for adults and kids who have kind of outgrown the Goosebumps stuff. So I'm going to give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark a 9 out of 10. Really liked it. So by far, it's one of the best movies I've watched so far during the Halloween 15. So there you go. That is my review of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Halloween 15, which will feature a yet-to-be-determined film. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take it easy.